The bull charged at his millionaire owner in a fury, but when a homeless man walked into the pen, the beast simply bowed its head. What happens next will leave you speechless. The bull roared, a thunderous sound that shook the ground and silenced the jeering crowd. Brutus's hooves struck the dirt in a frenzy, flinging dust into the air as his massive body surged forward. His target was clear: Vincent Halden, the man who called himself his master. The whip in Vincent's hand cracked once, twice, a desperate attempt to regain control, but the beast ignored it. The millionaire's confidence shattered in an instant. His sharp suit clung to him as he stumbled backward, his polished shoes slipping in the churned-up earth of the arena floor. Panic widened his eyes, and for the first time in years, the powerful man looked small, just another figure facing the raw, untamed force of nature. The audience erupted into chaos. Men in the front rows scrambled away from the wooden fences, climbing over each other in fear as the bull's charge shook the ground. Some shouted warnings, others screamed for guards to step in, but the guards themselves froze. Their hands clutched useless batons, their eyes darting between the charging animal and their master. The spectacle, meant to display dominance and control, had spiraled into something dangerous and unpredictable. Brutus's horns lowered as he lunged, his muscles rippling under the sunlight. Dust coated his hide, sweat streaked his body, and rage radiated off him in waves. Vincent staggered, one arm flailing for balance, the whip dangling uselessly in his other hand. He opened his mouth, shouting in a trembling voice, "Brutus! Stop!" But the command had no weight. The bull was no longer his to control. In that terrifying moment, Vincent's life seemed seconds away from ending. The crowd collectively held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Men who had once cheered his prideful speeches now muttered under their breath, some already turning away, unable to watch what looked like certain death. And then, cutting through the chaos, came a voice unlike any other in the arena. It was not loud. It was not commanding in the way Vincent's shouts had been. It was calm, low, steady, like the roll of distant thunder that warns of a coming storm. "Easy now," the voice said. "You've been wronged, but you're not alone." The sound carried farther than it should have, threading its way through the noise of panic. Brutus's hooves slowed. His massive body, still angled toward Vincent, shuddered as though torn between rage and recognition. The dust settled slightly, giving the crowd a clearer view of the unexpected figure stepping forward from the edge of the arena. Elias Ward. He was a man few had noticed when they filed into the stands. His beard was thick and uneven, his clothes patched and weathered, his boots worn thin at the soles. He had the appearance of one who carried his life on his back, drifting from place to place with no anchor. Most men avoided him in town, passing him on the streets as if he were invisible. Yet now, in the midst of chaos, all eyes were drawn to him. He walked slowly, with a quiet confidence that made the air feel heavier. Each step was measured, each movement calm, as though he knew something no one else did. His gaze never left Brutus, and in that gaze there was no fear, only understanding. His lips moved again, his voice a steady hum that carried like a chant. "You're not a weapon," he murmured. "You're more than their spectacle." Brutus's roar faded into a deep, rumbling snort. The bull turned his head away from Vincent, focusing entirely on Elias. Dust puffed up around his hooves as he came to a halt, chest heaving with heavy breaths. The sight left the crowd in stunned silence. Even the guards, still frozen at the edge of the arena, lowered their weapons, too shocked to act. Vincent, red-faced and trembling, stared in disbelief. His gold watch glinted in the light as his arm hung helplessly at his side. What is this?" he muttered, his voice breaking. "No, this cannot be." His words reached no one. All attention was fixed on the bull and the ragged stranger. Brutus lowered his massive head, his nostrils flaring, his eyes locked on Elias. And then, in a moment so surreal it seemed impossible, the bull bent his legs and sank down. Dust rose in a soft cloud as the beast bowed. The movement was not forced, not coaxed by whip or chain. It was deliberate, an act of submission and respect. The arena erupted with gasps. Men clutched each other's arms, some pointing, others whispering, unable to believe what they were seeing. The bull that had defied his master, the bull that no man could control, had bowed before a homeless wanderer. Elias stood still, his expression unreadable, though his eyes seemed to soften as Brutus lowered his head before him. He reached out, his rough, calloused hand brushing gently against the bull's forehead. Brutus closed his eyes briefly, letting out a low, guttural sound that was not rage but something closer to relief. Vincent's knees nearly buckled as he struggled to comprehend the scene before him. The humiliation washed over him like fire, burning deeper than fear ever could. For years he had built his reputation on power, wealth, and mastery. And now, in a single instant, It had all unraveled. Silence swept through the arena once more, broken only by Vincent's trembling voice. His words, cracked and disbelieving, echoed through the stunned crowd. This cannot be." Vincent's face burned red, his jaw tight, his eyes darting between the stunned crowd and the bull that no longer obeyed him. He snapped the whip again, the crack echoing sharply through the arena, but Brutus didn't flinch. Instead, the beast shifted closer to Elias, his heavy frame pressing protectively between the ragged man and the furious millionaire. Murmurs spread through the spectators, voices hushed yet filled with awe. "Did you see that?" one man whispered. "He chose him," another replied, almost reverently. "But who is he?" someone else muttered. "How could a drifter tame the untamable?" The questions hung in the air like smoke, thickening the humiliation pressing down on Vincent's shoulders. His body shook with anger, and his hands trembled as he raised the whip again. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Back! Obey me, Brutus!" Yet even as the words left his mouth, he could feel their emptiness. The bull's eyes no longer acknowledged him. Brutus snorted, shaking the ground as he pawed at the dirt. His stance was clear. Elias was his choice. And Elias, without theatrics or boasting, rested his rough hand gently on the bull's broad head. The crowd gasped at the gesture, for the mighty animal that had moments ago charged with murderous force now stood calm under the homeless man's touch. The violence had drained out of Brutus as though Elias had absorbed it, leaving behind only steady breath and quiet strength. Vincent's pride screamed louder than the voices around him. He could not, would not, let this moment define him. His status, his wealth, his very name had been built on the image of control. To lose it here, before all of Greyford, was unthinkable. He turned sharply to his guards, his fingers stabbing through the air at Elias. "Seize him! Now!" His voice rang with desperation more than authority. The guards hesitated, their eyes flickering from their master to the beast towering in front of Elias. Slowly, cautiously, they stepped forward, their boots grinding the dirt. But Brutus moved first. With a sudden swing of his horns, he drove them back in terror, forcing them to scatter to the edges of the arena. One man fell flat on his back, scrambling away as dust clung to his sweat-soaked face. The crowd erupted again, half in fear, half in exhilaration, the humiliation of Vincent only deepening. Vincent clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white. His chest heaved, and his voice broke with fury as he pointed toward Elias. "You think you can shame me in my own arena?" His words trembled, filled with venom. His glare fixed on Elias with an intensity that promised retribution. "This isn't over." But even as he spat those words, his confidence faltered. The crowd's eyes told the truth he refused to admit. Their loyalties were shifting. Men who once cheered for Vincent now watched Elias, drawn by his quiet command, his stillness that seemed to command more respect than wealth ever could. Elias finally broke his silence. His voice was not loud, yet it sliced through the noise like a blade. "You treat him like a weapon. That's why he turned against you. Animals see truth where men are blind." The words struck harder than any whip. The crowd stirred uneasily, some nodding, others gasping at the audacity of a homeless man daring to speak such truths to a millionaire. The atmosphere in the arena changed. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Vincent's eyes flicked across the crowd, realizing the tide was no longer in his favor. He stormed toward the exit, his footsteps heavy, his pride bleeding with every stride. The crowd parted reluctantly, some watching him with pity, others with disdain. He left the arena behind, but his fury burned hotter with every step. He would not forget this humiliation. And deep in his mind, a plan began to form. Elias Ward had stolen his beast, his pride, and the respect of the crowd. Vincent vowed he would take it all back, and when he struck, it would be brutal. As Vincent disappeared, the crowd erupted into restless conversation. The whispers traveled fast, spreading from one man to the next, until every corner of Greyford hummed with speculation. Some swore Elias possessed a hidden gift, a power beyond understanding. Others insisted he must have once been a great trainer, a man who had lost everything but retained the knowledge no one else possessed. Each rumor twisted and grew, turning the quiet drifter into a figure of legend overnight. Men who had never spoken to Elias before now sought him out. Some approached him with food wrapped in cloth, others offered a flask of water, and a few simply extended their hands, eager to be connected to the man who had made the mighty Brutus kneel. But Elias did not bask in their sudden admiration. He accepted little and asked for nothing. His lips remained sealed, his eyes carrying the same quiet calm that had stilled the bull. Those who pressed him with questions found only silence. If he had a story, he guarded it well. His gaze seemed to pierce through men, as if weighing whether they sought truth or spectacle. In those eyes was something that unsettled even the boldest, because they revealed a man who had endured much, and a man who feared little. That night, as the town settled into uneasy quiet, Greyford was alive with whispers. Around tavern tables, men leaned close, debating the meaning of what they had witnessed. Around fire pits, travelers repeated the tale to eager ears, each version growing grander than the last. And under the starlit sky, alone near the outskirts, Elias sat by Brutus, his hand resting on the beast's hide, his eyes reflecting flames from a small fire he had kindled. The bull's breaths were heavy but calm, the tension of the day gone. Elias spoke softly, words no one else could hear. "They don't understand you. They see only power, never truth. But truth always finds its way out." Brutus let out a low sound, almost as if he agreed. Elias knew the quiet would not last. Men like Vincent Halden never accepted humiliation. They plotted in the shadows, sharpened their pride like a blade, and returned with vengeance. Elias's heart carried no fear, but he felt the weight of what was coming. This was no end, only the beginning of something larger. The bowing of Brutus had changed everything, and the real test lay ahead. For though the arena had fallen silent and the crowd had dispersed, the memory of the day remained burning in every man's mind. Vincent's fury had not died, it had only been forced underground. And Elias, though calm, could already feel the storm gathering beyond the horizon. The bowing of Brutus was only the beginning, and the real test had yet to come. Vincent returned to the arena days later, the sun high and merciless above the town of Greyford. His boots struck the ground with a purpose that revealed the storm burning inside him. The whispers of his humiliation had spread far and wide. He could hear them even now as he walked, the mocking voices of men who once praised him now laughing behind his back. His pride, his very identity as the master of beasts, had been torn apart by one man, Elias Ward. And Vincent had sworn he would restore it, no matter the cost. This time, he did not come alone. Following him were a group of hardened men, their expressions sharp, their movements calculated. They were fighters who had earned their names by facing death in the form of claws, fangs, and horns. Unlike Vincent's guards, these men were seasoned professionals. The people of Greyford sensed something larger than a simple contest was about to unfold. Word spread quickly, drawing farmers from their fields, merchants from their shops, and travelers who had only just arrived in town. The arena filled once more, the air heavy with anticipation and dread. This was no ordinary spectacle. There was something about the way Vincent carried himself, the way he sneered at the crowd, that told everyone this was about vengeance, not entertainment. Elias arrived without ceremony. His steps were steady, his worn boots leaving shallow prints in the dust. He carried nothing in his hands, no ropes, no sticks, no weapons. Only the calmness in his eyes, and the silence that clung to him like a shadow. Some men in the crowd whispered that he was mad to come unarmed, others claimed he didn't need weapons, that his gift was beyond human. Elias gave no sign that he heard them. He walked into the arena with the stillness of someone who already knew his place in what was about to happen. Vincent watched him with a smirk stretched thin across his face, the kind of smile that tried to mask the trembling rage underneath. He raised a hand, and the gates at the far end of the arena groaned open. From within, 4 bulls thundered out, their hooves pounding against the ground with earth-shaking force. The crowd gasped. They had expected Brutus, perhaps, but not this. Alongside him came 3 more beasts, each larger, wilder, and more aggressive than the next. Their eyes burned with agitation, muscles rippling as they charged into the open, nostrils flaring with the scent of dust and fear. Elias stood at the center of it all, a lone figure in tattered clothes surrounded by chaos. Vincent's voice cut through the roar of the crowd, sharp and triumphant. "Let's see you command them now," he shouted, his words carrying the bitterness of a man desperate to reclaim his throne. The fighters Vincent had hired moved into place, spreading out in a calculated circle around Elias. They held long poles, spears, and ropes, their faces grim but confident. They had done this before, cornering wild beasts, controlling them, or, when necessary, killing them. To them, Elias was not the true target. He was only bait to prove that Brutus's defiance had been nothing more than a trick of luck. The ground shook as the bulls charged. Dust rose in thick clouds, stinging the eyes and choking the air. The crowd shouted, some cheering, some screaming, but all were unable to look away. Elias did not move. He closed his eyes, his lips barely parting as he whispered something under his breath. His posture was steady, his chest rising and falling slowly, as though the chaos rushing toward him were nothing more than a passing storm. Then it happened. Brutus, the largest of them all, swung his massive body sideways, slamming into the nearest bull with a force that sent the beast stumbling back. Gasps tore through the crowd. Instead of attacking Elias, Brutus turned on the others, bellowing with fury as if declaring the arena his own. The other bulls responded with rage, their horns striking, hooves lashing, but Brutus fought them back, driving them away from the man at the center. The fighters, caught off guard, scrambled to regain control. They shouted commands, thrusting their poles and ropes, trying to force order onto the chaos. But Brutus did not relent. With a surge of power, he swung his horns, scattering the men like dolls. One was flung into the dust, rolling until he came to a stop, groaning in pain. Another dropped his spear and fled to the edge of the arena, his courage shattered. The crowd erupted, screams blending with cheers, disbelief mingling with awe. Men clutched each other's shoulders, their eyes wide as they watched a scene no one could have imagined. Brutus was not obeying Vincent, nor was he being tamed by fear or force. He was defending Elias, standing as both shield and weapon for the man who had shown him nothing but calm. On his elevated seat, Vincent's smirk faltered. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched against the railing. He had expected Elias to fall, to be torn apart, proving to all that the miracle was a sham. But what he saw instead was a truth he could not deny. The bull had chosen. Brutus's loyalty was not his. It belonged to Elias. The irony of it struck him with crushing force, and for the first time his confidence faltered. Elias remained untouched in the center, his hand slowly rising. He did not shout, he did not command. He simply lifted his palm. Brutus, breathing heavily, stilled. The ground trembled as the beast stopped his assault, standing tall but calm, his sides heaving from the effort. The sight silenced the crowd, their cheers dying into an awed hush. Vincent's face twisted into horror, then into something darker. His pride, his wealth, his power, all had been undermined in front of the very people whose respect defined him. He could not endure it. In a blind surge of rage, he stormed down from his seat and into the arena, shoving aside his own men. His eyes were wild, his breath ragged. He snatched a spear from one of the fighters struggling to rise, his knuckles white as he gripped it. With a roar, Vincent hurled the weapon toward Elias, his desperation driving the throw. The spear cut through the air with deadly speed. But before it could reach its mark, Brutus lunged. The bull's massive body struck Vincent, sending him crashing to the ground. The spear clattered harmlessly across the dirt, spinning out of reach. The arena froze. Dust swirled around the scene as Vincent, once proud and untouchable, now lay pinned beneath the very beast he had boasted to control. Brutus's horns lowered, sharp and gleaming, their deadly points hovering inches from Vincent's chest. The millionaire's breath came in frantic gasps, his arms flailing helplessly against the weight holding him down. "Help me!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. But no one moved. The guards did not step forward, the fighters remained where they had fallen, and the crowd watched in stunned silence. For the first time, Vincent was powerless, his fate no longer in his own hands. All eyes turned to Elias. The man stood quietly, his expression unreadable, his calm presence a stark contrast to Vincent's panic. The moment stretched, the tension unbearable. Then Elias spoke, his voice steady and clear, carrying across the arena with the weight of truth. "The choice is his, not mine." The arena fell silent as Brutus loomed over Vincent, his breath heavy and steaming in the cool air. The bull's horns hovered only inches from the man's chest, sharp enough to end him with the slightest thrust. Vincent's eyes darted wildly, his lips trembling as he muttered incoherent pleas. The crowd, packed tightly along the wooden barriers, leaned forward in collective suspense. No one dared to move or breathe too loudly, afraid that any sound might push the beast into action. It was as though the entire town of Greyford was suspended in one fragile heartbeat. And then, in a moment that stunned every soul present, Brutus shifted his massive weight and stepped back. Dust stirred under his hooves as he pulled away from the man who once called himself master. Vincent blinked in disbelief, his body frozen against the dirt. The bull had spared him. The crowd erupted in gasps and cheers, the noise washing over the arena like a breaking wave. Children clapped, grown men shouted, and others simply shook their heads, unable to grasp what they had just witnessed. Brutus turned, his great frame casting a shadow across the ground as he moved toward Elias. The homeless man stood quietly, steady as stone, watching without flinching. When Brutus reached him, the beast lowered his head in a bow, his horns angled downward, his enormous body submitting in an act that carried more power than any roar or strike. The sight struck the townsfolk with awe. They had expected a fight, a bloody end, or at least a violent victory. But what they saw was something greater, loyalty given freely. The cheers grew louder, echoing beyond the arena's walls. Some men raised their hats in salute, others fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the revelation that true strength was not forged in chains or wealth, but in respect. A farmer near the front shouted, "The bull has chosen his master!" His words rippled through the crowd, repeated in whispers and cries until it became the voice of the people. Vincent remained in the dirt, his clothes soiled, his pride shattered. His face twisted in humiliation as he realized no wealth, no empire, could repair the sight of him pinned and then spared by the creature he once claimed to own. The crowd did not look at him with admiration or even fear anymore. Pity darkened their gazes, and some looked upon him with outright disgust. Men who once bowed before him now turned away, shaking their heads at his downfall. Vincent's name, once spoken with awe, had turned into a lesson of shame in that single moment. As the dust settled, the fighters Vincent had hired slipped quietly from the arena, their weapons dragging uselessly at their sides. None dared to meet his eyes, for they too knew their efforts had been made meaningless. The guards who once stood tall in his service now lingered in silence, their loyalty shaken. In their hearts they understood their master had lost more than just a contest. He had lost the very respect that upheld his power. When Vincent finally rose to his feet, staggering under the weight of both his body and his disgrace, no one offered him a hand. He limped toward the gates, the cheers behind him only deepening his humiliation. Brutus did not chase him, nor did Elias speak against him. Silence followed Vincent out, as if even words refused to walk with him anymore. In the days that followed, Greyford transformed. Vincent's fall spread like wildfire across the town and beyond. His investors, once eager to line their pockets with his ventures, withdrew their support. His partners, men who thrived under his shadow, turned their backs. Within weeks, his empire of pride collapsed, not with the thunder of hooves or clash of horns, but with the quiet erosion of trust. His wealth became dust in his hands, and his name, a whisper of failure that mothers used to warn their sons against arrogance. Elias, though he had never sought such things, became a figure of quiet reverence. Men who once mocked him as a drifter now approached with lowered heads, asking for advice or simply hoping to share in his presence. He accepted no riches, no offers of partnership, and no glory. Instead, he remained as he always was, clothed in humility, his life bound to the creatures who had given him belonging when mankind had turned him away. Brutus never left his side. Wherever Elias walked, through field or town, the bull followed like a guardian, fierce and unyielding in his devotion. Greyford itself began to change. Farmers who once struck their animals in frustration now treated them with care, remembering the day they had seen respect overcome fear. Fathers taught their sons to guide with patience, not cruelty. Merchants spoke of fairer deals, remembering that pride could ruin even the richest man. And children, oh the children, followed Elias through the narrow streets, asking him for tales of Brutus, their eyes wide with wonder. He rarely indulged them, but his silence spoke louder than stories, teaching them that not all wisdom came with words. Though Elias owned no home and claimed no fortune, he found himself surrounded by more than he had ever lost. The townsfolk who once overlooked him now offered food, shelter, and friendship. Yet Elias accepted only what was necessary, never more. In his eyes, he was already wealthier than any man in Greyford, for he had the loyalty of Brutus and the respect of those who had once cast him aside. But the greatest twist did not come with the cheers of a crowd or the shifting of fortunes. It arrived quietly, months later, as dusk settled over Greyford. Elias sat on a worn stone near the fields, Brutus grazing peacefully nearby, when an old traveler approached. The man's clothes were dusty from the road, his face lined with years of hardship, but his eyes gleamed with recognition. "I know who you are," the traveler said softly, his voice trembling with both awe and sorrow. Elias turned his head, calm as ever, waiting without interruption. The man continued, "You were once Elias Thorne, the trainer from Calvera, known across kingdoms for taming beasts no man dared face. They said you vanished after the fire that took your family." His voice broke, and the crowd of villagers who had gathered to listen grew silent. Men exchanged glances, their disbelief giving way to reverence. Whispers spread like wind. Elias, the drifter, the man they had scorned, was a legend hidden in rags. Some gasped, others bowed their heads in shame for ever doubting him. But Elias did not flinch. He neither confirmed nor denied the tale. His hand simply reached out, resting gently on Brutus's head, his eyes softened by memories too deep to share. The people waited, hungry for truth, but Elias gave them none. And in that silence lay the lesson he had always lived. It no longer mattered who he had been. What mattered was who he was now, and the bond he shared with the creature beside him. Greyford carried the story forward, not as one of wealth or loss, but as a revelation. The bull who bowed before a homeless man became a tale told at every hearth, a parable of respect, loyalty, and the futility of pride. Fathers spoke it to sons, elders to children, until it became part of the town's very soul. And though Vincent's name faded into disgrace, Elias and Brutus remained, their story shaping not just the fate of one fallen man, but the heart of an entire town. What mattered was the lesson Brutus had taught them all. respect commands loyalty, and loyalty is stronger than fear. Disclaimer. The story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of empathy, social class, and the profound, almost mystical connection that can form between those who are often overlooked by society. This narrative aims to highlight that true understanding transcends wealth and that compassion can be found in the most unlikely of places.